Welcome everyone to, I guess, one of the South Park Commons talks. Yeah, I guess there's no spiel that I need to give about South Park Commons. No one told me I was supposed to do that. So I guess I'll start by introducing Ron Conway. I'm Brian Krause. I'm a member at South Park Commons. I'll be moderating the talk. And this, for the zero of you who don't know already, is Ron Conway. He's founder and co-managing partner of SV Angel. He's been called a super angel. He's been called the godfather of Silicon Valley. He's been actively angel investing since the mid-90s. He was 2010's Vanity Fair 100 most influential people in the information age. He was awarded Best Angel. He was in the Midas list of top deal makers from Forbes. He is on the board of the Salesforce.com Foundation. He's been active in many, many charities. Specifically, he has founded SF.City for tech civic engagement in San Francisco and is a co-founder of Forward.us for immigration reform. And certainly has many opinions on both local and national politics that hopefully we'll have time to get to. Anything I missed there of note?
It's pretty good.
Cool.
We invest in one company a week.
Nice.
For 25 years.
Wow.
And just in internet software.
So if you miss a week, you just pick a random company?
So we stick to our knitting.
Nice.
No, funny enough, there are some weeks where it's 3 companies and then 2 weeks where there's 0, but it averages out to 1 a week for 25 years.
So tiny housekeeping, there's an iPad going around. Please fill in your name, email address, sign in. Please don't tweet the talk. We're going to keep it we're going to keep it pretty much to this room so that Ron can feel at liberty to talk shit about people, which I'm sure he totally will do.
Therefore, what happens in South Park stays in South Park.
Exactly. If anyone has any questions, raise your hand. We'll pass the mic around, and we'll try to leave plenty of time for people who have questions. So, yeah, I guess we'll start. So there's kind of 2 interesting topics that I wanted to spend some time on. One being, of course, startups, and the other being kind of politics, both local and national. But I suspect many people here as founders are interested in the startup side of things. So let's start with startups.
I hope you're interested in both.
Yes, I do too.
Since our country's in bad shape right now, and we need to be civically engaged.
This is true. So starting with the startup side, you were an early investor in many unicorns, such as Facebook and Stripe. What do you think the main thing you did that was most helpful to them in the early stages was?
In the case of Facebook, it was how I got into Facebook. We were early backers of Napster. And at the time, my kids were in high school, and they said, my God, you're finally investing in something that's cool. And so they didn't know it at the time, but I had each of their trusts invest like $50,000 in Napster, and that became wallpaper because Napster got acquired, but ultimately went out of business. A lot of people think Sean Fanning and Sean Parker became wealthy at Napster. They didn't. Napster was a very unhealthy outcome, ultimately going out of business. But so I met Sean Parker and Fanning when they were 19, and Parker went off and started a company called Plaxo. We were the first investors in Plaxo, and we helped him sell that company to Comcast. And just a really funny story. At the time, the CEO, because Parker, was chairman, but they had a CEO. He said, "We're selling it to Comcast." I said, "Oh, I know a whole bunch of people at Comcast. What do you want to get for it?" And he said, $125 million is what I thought I heard, but he said $95 million. And they ended up getting $125 million. That's what I did.
Most valuable mispronunciation.
I called him. He was just talking fast, and I was in a hurry. But thank God it wasn't the reverse, right? So Parker, when he became president of Facebook, called me up and said, "Will you please come help me and Mark, mentor me the way you have at all the other companies?" And so in the very first meeting, I actually told Mark Zuckerberg, come without Parker, which was really strange. but I wanted to tell him how edgy Parker was. And Zuckerberg was already so smart. And this is Zuckerberg at the time, he was 18 or 19. It was the summer they had come out to California when they never went back. And I said, hey, Parker has his assets and his liabilities, and I kind of want to warn you about that. And he goes, oh, yeah, I know all about that, but I'm going to need this thing called viral marketing. And back when Facebook started, Facebook's 18 years old now, I think. So 18 years ago, the word viral and marketing weren't even used together. But Sean Parker really invented that, the idea of viral marketing at Plaxo. And so, then we had subsequent meetings, and Facebook was already starting to take off. The numbers were staggering. And it was the second company where my kids said, hey, that's a cool company. Why don't you go work there? And I said, no, I'm not going to go work there. But the first thing I did for Facebook was help on their VC funding. And it was interesting because Don Graham from the Washington Post had met Mark. I think Mark was an intern at the Washington Post. And Don Graham took a liking to him. And remember, he's 18 years old. But somehow he stood out to Don Graham. And when Don Graham heard that he was going to start a company, he said, I want to be the VC, even though the Washington Post is not a VC. And I knew Don Graham by reputation and doing work in philanthropy. And I just thought it would be really cool if he invested. But Excel ended up outbidding the Washington Post. But I mentored them all through that. And we started from the beginning, making a list of the top 30 VCs that I thought would be good for Facebook. And we do this for every company. I hope that's not my phone, but it might be. Based on the company and the founder and personalities, we match them up to like 30 VCs that we think will be interesting to them. And then we have the founder, in this case it was Parker and Zuck, look over the list and pick the ones that they think are the best. And for Facebook, I said, hey, we probably only need you to talk to 10 people and you'll probably get funded. And the Washington Post and Excel were one of those 10. So they didn't just talk to those two, it got whittled down to those two. And it's so funny, David Kirkpatrick was writing a book, and so he interviewed me, and I was telling him about this funding, and he goes, well, none of that's true. And I said, well, who's telling you that? Well, there's other people, and you didn't have anything to do with the funding. And I said, just hold on for a second. We were at my home. And I print any email that I think is important. So I have tons of file cabinets. I have like one drawer for each company. Like Google is a drawer and a half. Twitter is a drawer and a half. Facebook's a drawer and a half. And all that's in those file cabinets is any email that I thought was important. They're emails that I usually took to meetings to talk about. And I knew right where that email was. It was the email with that list of 30 companies, whittling it down to 10. I just handed him the email string and I said, I don't know who you're talking to, and he goes, it's pretty unequivocal that you were pretty involved in the Facebook financing. And then after that, it was recommending people to Facebook, but in the case of Facebook, it was funding. In the case of Stripe was funded by Y Combinator and Sequoia right from the get-go. So with them, it wasn't funding, but it was like, hey, we need a merchant bank of record for this, at the time, crazy idea that, hey, there's going to be a lot of websites that want to do transactions that also need a bank of record. And for Stripe, we need to provide that banking relationship. And I said, well, the biggest, best bank in America right now is Wells Fargo, and I happen to know the chairman. And this is Patrick and John when they were probably 16 and 17 years old. They were late to the meeting with the chairman. They like to ride bikes, so they were sweating profusely. It's not. It happened, but it was not a great meeting from my point of view, because I'm hoping they could put a better foot forward. But when you're 16 and 17, yeah, you can't blame them. But Wells Fargo was fascinated with that opportunity, and with the endorsement of people like me and Sequoia Capital and Paul Graham at Y Combinator, they took a flyer, and they're still the primary bank of record for Stripe. So those are kind of the first things I did for those two. Yeah, and we don't take board seats, because boards have, no matter what in your history, you're going to have an antagonistic relationship with the board, the founder. And we don't want to be part of that conversation. SV Angel, if we had a moniker, it would be Advocates for Founders. And what we tell founders is, we don't want to be in the boardroom. We can have a 20-minute meeting and cover 10 topics. And you just tell us things that you need to help advance. And if we can help you, we'll help you. So what we're famous for is helping at any inflection point. Fundings are always an inflection point. The Wells Fargo deal for Stripe, that was a big inflection point. Couldn't go anywhere until they had a merchant bank.
Interesting. You mentioned personality match as one of the criteria when selecting those 30 companies. How important of a criteria is that? And like, how high variance is it that you say, oh, this is not going to be a good personality fit, so not a potential investor?
Yeah, we know the investment community so well. You think of any VC firm, Sequoia, Excel, KP, Andreessen Horowitz, they all have like 10 investing partners each. So it's not, you think of Sequoia, it's not one investor, they got 10 or 20. And we know all the personalities of them. So the advice we give to a founder is like, for Jack Dorsey, when he started Square, we said, hey, you should probably have somebody in the PayPal mafia be an investor in your company. So, why don't you go talk to Roelof Botha, who's at Sequoia, who was one of the PayPal mafia. It ended up Vinod Khosla invested first. Sequoia didn't like the price of the round. Huge mistake, if you ask me. But so Vinod Khosla, and by the way, that whole weekend Vinod was complaining a lot. And I said, hey, I got 5 people behind you that'll do it. So the thing we do a lot of the back channeling for founders. Like if they want X value, we'll try and get them that value. And in the back channel, we'll go find other VCs saying, yeah, I'll pay in that range. And then we truthfully call the lead VC and say, you're going to lose this. And there's enough examples out there, and the VCs all talk to each other, where they go, wow, Conway told me I was going to lose it, and I lost it. And once again, we're being advocates for founders.
Interesting. What advice would you give startup founders today?
Not to waste too much time on funding. There's so much money out there today that it's literally ridiculous. I would get your funding done quickly, and instead of valuation, focus on the value add of one of the partners in the firm that you're going to pick, because that person, you're going to see them at the board meetings, and that person really is meant to be your mentor. So just so by way of background, SV Angel invests we love it when it's 5 or 10 people. And we invest in the seed round, which is usually $1 million. We invest, let's say, $200K along with 5 other people in a syndicate to get to $1 million. And then we help the company for the first 2 years. And when they're ready for the VC round, then we help them with that VC round. And that's when we kind of do the matching of personalities. Because this founder, if it's going to be a 20-year-old company, the founder is with that VC for 20 years. Peter Thiel at Facebook. He was he was the angel in Facebook, and then Excel was the VC, and Peter Thiel is still on the board of Facebook. 18 years later, it's a long-term relationship. So find investors that have domain expertise in your field. I mean, if you're in payments, go find someone who knows an astronomical amount about payments so that they can really add value. And when you're talking to them, ask a ton of questions about how big is their Rolodex in payments. Can you introduce me to Dan Schulman, the CEO at PayPal? Can you introduce me to the new president of Wells Fargo? By the way, we hate it when there's big management changes because we have to go cultivate a new relationship at Wells Fargo. We knew Sloan real well. We knew Kovacevic. I forget there was one other, and then Sloan. Sloan's the one who quit last week. And I'm like, God, that's a disaster for us because we have no bench at Wells Fargo now. So I have a new action item. I've got to go find an SVP, and I'll go ask Tim Sloan and Dick Kovacevic. But I've got to go meet somebody, go out to several lunches, and form a relationship where they trust when we say, hey, we think you ought to see this company, they will see that company.
How deliberate are you in that process of saying we're weak in certain areas, let's go cultivate relationships here so that we have them?
Oh, we're really just like Wells Fargo is a great example. I'm going to go cultivate another very senior relationship at Wells Fargo. We have too many of our companies want to have a relationship at Wells Fargo. Google has lots of org changes. And so Google, we're in so deep there, we usually know the person that got promoted. But if we don't, then we got to go see the person who got promoted and get that relationship going.
So when you talk about cultivating the relationship, what in particular are you talking about there? What concrete things are you doing to build that relationship?
Mainly just building trust, showing them our portfolio, showing them what we've accomplished, and that when we bring them a company, they should trust that we think that company can add value to Google or Wells Fargo or Facebook, so that they actually take that first meeting and give that founder the benefit of the doubt. Because Google, Facebook, Apple, Twitter, all these companies now, they're behemoths. So they're not used to talking to startups. Even though they were a startup one day, they kind of forget that they were, and they tend to want to work with a bigger company. And we're always there tapping them on the shoulder saying, no, you're missing the latest and greatest innovation if you don't talk to these founders. Lots of these companies, we organize afternoons where we have 5 or 6 companies go in and present to the management team. We try and do everything at scale.
You mentioned looking for, as advice, looking for kind of a single value-add investor in that kind of suite of your first $1 million. What are your thoughts on kind of the other investors? Is it fine just to take effectively dumb money? How carefully should you evaluate that?
No, you want every single investor to be value-added money, and you want a great syndicate, because when you go for your VC round and then the round after that, all of your success is going to be depending on how good those first 5 investors were. And like SV Angel, we don't want to carry the whole load. We don't want to be the only one responsible for getting a company funded. So when we do that first round, we try and syndicate to value-added investors like us, so we share the workload, we share the Rolodex, we share the relationships. So every one of those investors is very important.
Got it. So, excuse me. Last year, you announced that you were not raising another fund for SV Angel. Can you talk about the thought process behind that? Maybe overview of the change for people who didn't see that announcement and why you're doing it?
Yeah. So for Well, in the very, very beginning, in the 1990s, we just invested our own money. Then I started a tiny fund named after the street I lived on, Adam Ventures. And I liked the idea of having more capital to leverage. And so we went to friends and family and started a fund. So all the way from then till now, we had like 11 funds, and all friends and family. It's like an investment club. It's like South Park Commons, where no institutional investors. It was just friends of ours that we met along the way. The 75% wealthy internet entrepreneurs whose company already went public, and investing in SV Angel was a way for them to track what are the next upcoming technologies that I should be aware of. And all they have to do is read our quarterly reports and they'll see that. So it was very, very synergistic. Now we also want to return to our friends and family return on capital. Valuations are so high right now that if we can't collect money from investors thinking we can return at least 3x what they gave us, we shouldn't be taking their money. And we couldn't really look at ourselves in the mirror and say, if we raise a fund right now with these lofty valuations, can we get a 3x return? Not so sure we can. So we just decided to sit out an inning, and we're investing our own money. So our investment pace is the same, still investing in one a week. We're just funding them ourselves right now and hoping that this lofty market will calm down a little bit, and maybe some of the sloppy money go to the sidelines.
Do you think that indicates some systematic problem in the system, or is it just kind of within the normal ebbs and flows of supply and demand in the market? Specifically the valuations being so high right now?
I would say it's systemic. There's way too much money in the market, and it's been that way for 5 years, and it seems like it'll be that way for a while. So it's going to be harder for venture funds to produce returns. So in the long term, I think venture funds will not have returns. There'll be a weeding out of venture funds, and then that'll be a correction in the market, and that'll probably be healthy.
Does that imply that a founder raising today should just completely ignore valuation as long as it's within some bounds of reasonable? Like, how do we as founders account for that in searching out money?
Well, as founders, you really want your investors to be successful. And there's a lot of founders who think it's more prestigious to get some huge valuation and say, oh, the investors can figure it out for themselves. But if the investors aren't seeing the potential for return on investment, they're not going to invest as much time in that company. It's got to be a win-win for everybody. And we're seeing some valuations now where the seed round is at a 5 million valuation, and Series A, it is a 100 million valuation. Well, a lot of investors like us just walk away from that. It's like, it's not a win-win. The risk is lopsided in that example.
I'd love to take a second for any questions anyone has.
We just had Diane Greene, who ran cloud for Google. She has a pal who's like her neighbor, who's a Stanford professor, peddling 100 million valuation. And she goes, you don't even have anything to show. What made you pick that number? Well, I read all this stuff. And she goes, well, I'm not investing.
So when you're investing, like, what do you look for? And, like, for example, what get you excited about Stripe or Google, for example?
We always look at the people first and the idea second. So it's all the traits of the founder. That document.
Alex, there should be a pile of papers next to you if you can hand up.
We actually have a handout that talks to this.
He's a plant.
So thank you. But on this piece of paper, we have the traits we look for in a founder. But the main trait that we look for a founder is, are they determined? Are they persistent? Will they make decisions quickly? Procrastination is the devil. And in the last 2 years, I have been in pretty big companies that all of us know the name of that we're investors in, and the company is starting to become crippled because they can't make decisions fast enough. You have to make decisions quickly. If you make mistakes, that's fine. As long as you catch them and correct them, you are much better off than procrastinating. You have to have enough charisma to be able to recruit a team. I'll take one too, so I can talk to it. You have to, if you think of the steps, you have to have a good idea. You have to be able to build a prototype. Once the prototype gets some acceptance, you got to hire more engineers to add features, perfect it, QA it. So you've got to have the ability to hire engineers out of Google, Facebook, Apple, Twitter, you name it. That's a real skill. So one of the things when I'm talking to a founder, I'm saying, hey, will you be able to recruit a really good engineer out of Google? Because if you can't, you're not going to be able to grow. So being able to recruit. But these are the traits in a founder, on this list. And we just subconsciously go through all these. After 25 years, I can talk to a founder literally for 5 minutes and turn to one of the other people in SV Angel and just say, we should invest in that. I just know it, from instinct. But it's a combination of these traits.
Where in angel investing do you think there's a place for kind of that instinctual, been doing this for 25 years versus a more systematic, quantitative approach? Is it pretty much all intuition, or is there's something?
Oh no, there's lots of VCs and investors who invest using the quantitative approach. Many. Sequoia, one of their huge factors is what's the total available market and how much of, so it's got to be a multi-billion-dollar market. Then they look at the founder and they go, okay, how much of that market do we think this founder and this idea can take, the service available market? And if those match, kaboom, they want to invest. So every investor has little different criteria. At SV Angel, it's just all about the people. But remember, every founder is really different. Larry and Sergey, everyone thought they were arrogant. I was like, God, you think they're arrogant? And most of the other investors that looked at Google in the beginning, when it was 5 people, those two are going to be impossible. And I go, no, to me, they look pretty goal-driven. They want a VC who invested in AOL, so they get an OEM deal with AOL because they were very late to the search market. And we need Sequoia because we need Mike Moritz to get us into Yahoo real quick and get an OEM deal done at Yahoo. That happened. But because they were so determined about that, people thought they were arrogant and closed-minded. And I go, no, it's for 2 PhD students, they got a pretty good strategy going. Let's just help them execute. And the rest is history. We used to say about Google, this might be a $100 billion company someday. I mean, that's like unfathomable. And now it's 800 billion.
I guess since you're looking for earlier stage investments, first question would be, what spaces are you currently really excited about?
Say that again.
What spaces are you currently excited about?
Oh, sure.
And also, I guess right now there's a lot of spin out funds, like Kindred or like Bedrock type. So I guess with those, do you have any insight into which ones, for you personally, are like more promising or more exciting?
I didn't bring it, but we have another chart on the sectors that we like. Let me try and remember what's on it. But if SV Angel was to be stereotyped, you would stereotype us as, hey, they're in consumer, because we're in Napster, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. So our low-hanging fruit is consumer, but we also like SaaS. We're getting into healthcare now. We also like crypto and blockchain, and that's new, brand new for us. But we are believers. There's a lot of people who aren't believers. Those would be the main sectors that we're interested in. These other companies, like Bedrock, is that the one out of Detroit with Dan Gilbert?
Bedrock is Jeff Lewis, New York.
Don't even know it.
He was at Founders Fund for I think like 5 years or so. And he left.
But is he a boutique fund going after one particular space?
Yet to be seen. Still quite new, but I think so.
Because there are some of these spin-off funds that are very focused on one space. I think that's very, very smart these days.
So I wanted to shift gears to focus on some of your civic interests as well, just because I think it's important for smart people to contribute back to cities. What ideas and kind of what channels and resources do you think are available to founders to give back to their community? And maybe you could lend some advice to us as local founders in ways that we can improve the local community for the better, because I think a lot of us want to live here for a while and we want to improve it.
Yeah, and we're under siege. The tech community in San Francisco has been under siege, in my opinion, for 5 years. We had a brief interlude about 2 years ago where we had Mayor Ed Lee, who was a business-friendly person, and we had a business-friendly board of supervisors. That's now over. We have a business-friendly mayor, London Breed. And by business-friendly, these people do not necessarily care about tech or business. What Ed Lee and London Breed care about, our current mayor, is just job creation. Because the unemployment rate just 10 years ago in San Francisco, when Ed Lee became mayor, was 10%. He had to create jobs. And that's when, the famous Twitter tax came about, which I'm the one who went and told him. I said, Twitter's about to move out. Dick Costello's serious. It's the Success Factors building in Brisbane. He's about to lease it. Success Factors is in there now. And Ed Lee took it seriously and said, hey, are you serious? Will Twitter really have 2,000 people? At the time, they had 200. I go, yes, if you keep them here. So it's all about job creation. Now, because San Francisco, and it's not our fault, but we're being blamed for it, San Francisco, for like 6 years in a row, had like a couple of hundred housing or apartment units built in the city, a few hundred a year, while we were creating jobs. So we got thousands of units behind while we were coming in and creating jobs, and now we get blamed for it. Now, obviously, because of scarcity, the cost of housing has skyrocketed, but most of our board of supervisors are NIMBYs who, even though we have this housing crisis, they don't want to build any new housing. They'd rather everyone magically go away. This guy, Aaron Peskin, he believes this. And a majority of the board of supervisors out of the 11 believe that. Now, what do we do about that? We need to stand up for our rights. Right now, the board of supervisors is talking about an IPO tax. That's not fair. I mean, the tech community has to go to these meetings and protest these crazy decisions that they're making. and we have to get involved in the electoral process. So we get a board of supervisors who's 6 moderates.
Is there like a good channel for all of us to like know when those meetings are happening and kind of have
SF City is the place to do that. So Ed Lee, when he became mayor, I just kind of wanted to go back and start investing again. He goes, no, you got to start an association of tech companies or these people are going to roll over you. So we started SF City, San Francisco Citizens Initiatives for Technology Innovation. That is our trade group. And just go to sfcity.org and subscribe to our newsletter. The newsletter tells you everything that's going on. It tells you every public hearing. It tells you the ones that are desperately important. We really need people to show up. And then you need to get involved in the electoral process. SF City puts out a slate card guiding the tech community on what to vote on, which measures, et cetera. And London Breed is a reasonable person. We just want her to get reelected next November. That all takes work. If everyone here starting next June said to everyone they came in contact with, I think London Breed should be our next mayor, she'll be the next mayor. Luckily, we don't think she has a formidable opponent. But it's word of mouth that people trust. So we have to get involved. And we have to do the same thing at the national level. If we're just complacent, Trump gets reelected. And there's many, many great tech efforts. One of them is called techforcampaigns.org. Anyone here can go to that website and volunteer to help the technology efforts in a campaign around the country. So every campaign around the country, congressional, Senate, they say, I need someone to help me with social media. I don't know anything about social media. I need to set up a database. And then tech volunteers are connected and go help campaigns all over the country. So Tech for Campaigns is just one example. But we have to get out and vote. You know, these March for Our Lives students from the Parkland tragedy, they got the millennial vote from 20% to 30% vote in the midterms. They turned a bunch of congressional districts.
Interesting. So certainly the housing crunch has been the source of a lot of the blame on tech for housing prices and kind of animosity. Is there something tech should have done differently, or do you think it's strictly the political failing of housing and there's nothing that could have been done to change our perception within the San Francisco community that is angry at us?
I don't want to sound complacent, but the minute Ed Lee realized the mismatch in job creation versus housing, he said, we're going to build 30,000 housing units. And he did this 6 or 7 years ago. We're going to build 30,000 housing units by 2021. The city, because of Ed Lee, is on schedule to do that. And the tech community are the ones who elected him. And so kudos to us. It's a tragedy that he passed away because we lost momentum. But that 30,000 housing units is getting built. He turned City Hall upside down. And so I think we need to trumpet the fact that we got those built. Now, we're still way behind the 8 ball. It's probably a deficit of 10,000 units, especially in the affordable housing range, where entry-level workers, that were desperate for that housing, and for school teachers and firemen. Facebook, have you heard of CASA? There's a whole effort around housing in the Bay Area. Like, hey, this isn't San Francisco's problem, it is the Bay Area's problem. And this civic group called CASA, and it just got another new name. But thank God Gavin Newsom is a YIMBY, not a NIMBY. Gavin Newsom is like, there's going to be housing across the board equally in every community in California. And he is going to get really nasty about it, which is great because San Francisco can't carry the housing burden alone when Brisbane and Oakland say, it's San Francisco's issue. It's a Bay Area issue. And in the case of Gavin Newsom, he's saying it's a California issue.
Shifting a little bit towards national politics, certainly it seems like tech is becoming increasingly scrutinized as a weapon that was used in the 2016 election and potentially in need of more regulation. How do you see this kind of playing out, both generally with tech and specifically with Facebook?
Well, number one, Mark Zuckerberg is not a malicious person. If he was, my attitude about Facebook would be different. Sean Fanning started Napster. A lot of you probably weren't even born yet, but he was a demon. And I used to fly to LA and bring him with me to the record labels and say, does he look malicious to you? I mean, to them, he was a demon. So I just bring him in and say, no, he's an innovator. If he didn't create it in his dorm room, it would have been created in a dorm room down the hall a week later. What are you talking about? You can't stop this. And we want to cooperate. Now, did Facebook act fast enough? Hell no. Do they have to make up for lost time? Hell yes. And now I think they're going to have to voluntarily, which Mark Zuckerberg just did in a blog post last weekend, say, okay, here's how we think our industry should be regulated, and be proactive about it instead of reactive. So we stop having all these hearings in Washington, D.C., and just get some of these privacy regulations passed, while we are being vigilant about tracking Russian and other unfriendly governments from trying to take over our electoral process. Because shame on Mark, the very first time people said, hey, there could be Russian infiltration and influence, it was like, that it was hard to believe for everybody, but it was happening, and it would have been awesome if we moved faster.
Do you think it's possible that we've waited too long, specifically in that, in order to push away fake news, for example, there almost definitionally needs to be an impact on engagement for Facebook, and as a public company, that does have to have some negative impact. Do you see Facebook when it comes to those difficult decisions of lowering engagement by virtue of hiding news that people tend to engage with, namely the news that they tend to agree with, or is more extreme, kind of going against shareholder value?
I'm not exactly sure what you're getting, but I don't think Facebook should be moderating content unless it's extreme, which they are doing. They're always last to the party. I thought it was great that Pinterest said the issues with vaccine are known scientific data. So if people are anti-vaccine, we're not putting that on our website. Scientifically, it's false. We're not going to do that. And I don't even know if Facebook has done it yet. They need to be proactive. Now, the Russian influence in elections is a worldwide problem for Facebook. So they've hired like 30,000 moderators to audit all of the sites to catch the fake news and the misinformation that's being injected into the system. And that commitment was made like a year ago. But every day there's an election going on around the world where, believe me, there's a war room at Facebook where they're like going in Romania today, there's an election, and we got to make sure that in Romania there's no fake news on Facebook. So all I'm trying to say is the magnitude of the problem is massive. I mean, Putin is trying to undermine goodwill in every country on earth. He just loves unrest. And we need to solve that.
Taking a step back from Facebook to more broadly, how would you rate Silicon Valley's role in the national political scene? I think the Valley, at least several years ago, seems to have taken we are infrastructure, we are unopinionated, we are the Chrome of the internet in many ways. Do you think that was just a massive misstep? Or was it a reasonable thing to do to try to be kind of less politically opinionated and less involved?
I kind of see it differently. Silicon Valley's always been known for being a place where candidates come to fill the coffers with donations. Literally, I mean, all the way back to the Clinton years, they come here and get the money, and then they take it and sprinkle it around the rest of the country to get elected. So Silicon Valley has been a major source of bundling of donations. But now people are laying low even more. And I think that's a tragedy, because right now is when anyone who has the means needs to be donating to the anybody but Trump effort. So any candidate that's out there, and especially the nominee, I cannot imagine what this country is going to be like if it's another 4 years of Trump. So I think people in Silicon Valley need to donate more than ever before and help as much as they can with the technology infrastructure that we need, the data science that we need, the ad engineers that we need. Michael Bloomberg's announced he's investing $500 million to defeat Trump. Now, a couple of $100 million of it is the organizations he has already for global warming and for gun safety. But net, he's going to put in a couple $100 million to beat Trump. The tech industry should be guiding him to invest that money very wisely in social media and not dump it all on TV, which is old school. And so we need to contribute as much technology expertise as we possibly can to all of these efforts. I point to Bloomberg just because a couple $100 million is significant. And I'm actually giving him some of that advice, and when his people call, it becomes my top priority. You need a data scientist, I'm going to find you one, because it's the highest leverage.
So one of the things that I think is so incredible about SV Angel is these relationships you talked about with these leaders at other companies, big companies, and many of them are the aspirational customers of lots of people in this room. I'm curious what you've learned from them in terms of what their biggest gaps are, what the technology solutions they are looking for are, and also how to best sell into them as a smaller company.
Well, funny enough, a lot of these tech companies are so big now, they don't know where the gaps are. And founders, entrepreneurs, can go find those pain points and create software and solutions around them. And then those founders rely on us to get the attention of those behemoths to say, you need to look at this technology. Now, because we have these powerful relationships, we can get these big behemoths, to listen and take a meeting. The blessing of SV Angel is Google, Facebook, Twitter are three companies where we were the seed investors. So we help, as seed investors, the first thing you do is pile in anyone you can into that management team. So sprinkled all over Google, Facebook, and Twitter are people that we placed there. And because of their success, they're very wealthy. And so when we call, they say, I remember when Ron told me to work here and not there, and look where I am. And they'll take a meeting. It's all about relationships. It's the power of the relationship network. And other VCs can't recreate that. That takes 40 years.
Speaking of how large some of the tech companies are, I feel like I've heard more out of the Democratic camps, sort of including Elizabeth Warren, but also everyone who talks about antitrust, talking about quote unquote big tech. I'm curious both sort of what the balance is on how that conversation affects startups. I think how it affects the big companies is obvious.
Well, with the behemoths out there, who's going to start another social network? Who's going to start another search engine? Funny enough, after Google went public, I thought Larry and Sergey might get complacent, and SV Angel perished the thought. We invested in a couple of search startups because I said, who knows if they're going to stay focused. In the case of Google and Facebook, they have been so dedicated and invested so much every year to be leaders in their core market. They never got complacent. But because of that, who is going to start a search company or another social network? So founders have had to go find other niches, and founders are doing that. I mean, Evan Spiegel did it at Snapchat. But those are fewer and far between. So, yes, as these companies get bigger, founders have to be even more creative and find a place for brand new markets. And that's happening every single day.
I guess my question was specifically, how would you respond to Democrats who say we got to break up these companies, they're too big?
Oh, well, I have Elizabeth Warren and Bernie. If either one of them get nominated, we're guaranteed to get Trump back because there's not enough voters who will switch to Bernie or Elizabeth. So sorry for being partisan, but those two make me really nervous, in addition to what they say about big tech. Hopefully tech can regulate itself. There's enough pressure now with Elizabeth Warren and AOC and Bernie. I'm hoping that these big companies are saying, hey, maybe we should spin off XYZ division, and respond themselves rather than having it forced upon them.
What candidates are you excited about?
I've endorsed Cory Booker, Kamala Harris. I like Mayor Pete. Who else have we got out there? Who's the guy from Texas who beat Cruz? Beto. I think he's interesting. Because of his stand on guns, I want to support Biden, but his performance last week I thought was really bad. I think he's kind of tone deaf. I'm now kind of hoping he doesn't run and let all the others run and see who surfaces. There's great candidates out there. Klobuchar. And let 1,000 flowers bloom, and just like Obama, we saw it. One of them is going to surface. And I would just as soon it be one of the more unknown ones. And whoever gets that nomination, we have to have the infrastructure in place. So it's turnkey for them to win those key states. There's a whole bunch of work being done right now, building infrastructure in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and just for the hell of it, Florida. So that whoever the nominee is, they have, like, the office is built, all the computers are up and running, the campaign manager's sitting there. That is what we're aspiring to do. And I think it has to happen. Now, did I answer the question? I think there's a lot of great candidates out there. So may the best one bubble up, other than Warren and just because I think I bet you Trump every night says, let it be Elizabeth or Bernie, because he literally statistically almost impossible for Trump to lose at that point. Any other candidate, we are going to defeat him, in my opinion. We're going to shower them with all the tools they need to win.
So that's related to politics. What do you think that America, Central America, like whatever Pennsylvania, whatever, are getting wrong, and you could change their mind about?
So, like for example, Trump case, right? They might elect him because they approve guns or whatnot. Like, what would change their minds?
And you're talking about Middle America, right? The biggest problem in Middle America is income inequality. We have to bring tech jobs to Middle America. That's almost as hard as solving the housing crisis in San Francisco. But you have to start somewhere. And Steve Case has this bus, do you know the Steve Case bus that goes around and funds startups only in Middle America, only in obtuse cities where venture capitalists and funders of any size exist. He rolls in with the bus. He has basically a quick demo day, and he funds like 5 companies. And then the bus goes to another city. That is the kind of stuff that has to happen. Google has to create, 50,000 jobs in the middle of the country. And they're doing that in some cities, just probably not fast enough.
So are you going to create the anti-SV angel now then? The non,
What does that
are you
mean?
going to create the non-Silicon Valley? I mean, there's this whole
Hey, Steve Case ridicules me, and I don't blame him. He goes, "Why don't you get off your ass and get a bus too?" In Middle America, because that is where the country's falling apart. And I literally say, the South of Market in San Francisco is a magnet. I cannot leave. And he goes, "Shame on you." And I go, "I agree, shame on me." But there are other people doing that, and we have to support them as much as we possibly can.
Do you have any advice for that balance of, many of us are thinking about what company we would build, and, there's the one approach of try to build the thing that you think will be the most successful, go after a big market that you have passion about, and then there's this lingering civic service kind of question. Do you have any advice for balancing those two?
Well, there's a whole, thousands of companies blossoming that are B Corps who are doing a social good, and investors are much more open now about investing in those companies. So the more momentum we have there, the better.
But you think it sounds like
But it's going to be easier to start a C Corp where you're solving some known pain point than solving some social issue.
got it. So
But there's more and more of the social entrepreneurs out there, which is a blessing.
so it sounds
10 years ago, nobody.
So it sounds like, if I'm not mistaken, you're advising form a company that is solving some need, but just try to make sure the company has good values and does good work and things like that.
Right, for sure. Airbnb would be an example. Every night there's a couple of million people, host and guest, who are communicating and being civil to each other. That's a blessing. So a lot of these companies are fulfilling some social good as part of their mission. But we encourage companies to sign the 1% pledge, where you give 1% of your startup stock to a foundation, and then when the company goes public, you'll have like a $50 million foundation. And then 1% of your time for volunteer efforts, and if applicable, the product. That's something Mark Benioff started right here in SF. There's 8,000 companies who have signed the pledge now.
Time for one or two more questions.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing up the B Corp and 1% pledge. It also means apparently you can still wear the Patagonia jackets. So 1% pledge, you don't get kicked out of that.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing.
They're not giving jackets to folks anymore who co-branded without that.
To investment banks and people that they think might do evil.
So that's how you keep it. So I was actually going to ask, sort of on similar lines, how do you avoid getting more of the sort of like we move too slowly issues within companies, and especially, I think about this as someone who, in pre-2016, was trying to get Facebook to divert more attention toward these issues, and they weren't able to. I wasn't able to do that effectively, and there's more to do still to affect upcoming elections. So I'm thinking about what are the ways in which investors and angels can actually help ensure that companies are less likely to have these unintended negative impacts?
Less likely to have what?
Unintended negative impacts. So I'm doing that through nonprofit work, but I think that there's, as an angel, as an investor, you have leverage.
Yeah. I think the investors have a duty to bring this up to the founders and give the founders the blessing that you can do 1% pledge. I ask all of our founders, will you pledge 1% of your stock to a company foundation? And they go, my God, I don't even know where to put that on the agenda at the board meeting, because all the investors talk about is don't keep diluting us. Well, hey, that's nothing but greed. And the founder has to have enough conviction to say, your dilution is not what's important here. The culture of this company and the culture around giving and being a good part of the civic community is what's important, and I want to do this. We need venture capitalists to applaud that instead of almost forbidding it. So we have a whole bunch of VCs now who have signed up that when it comes up, they will not oppose anything to do with philanthropy and the giving pledge, and the 1% pledge. What? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's no name for it. So a lot of Sequoia and Andreessen Horowitz, a lot of the big VCs have adopted this, but they don't want to advertise it. Here we have the greed again, because then every founder will do it, when I think every founder should do it. Because once I got enough of them to agree to this, I said, okay, I want you to put this logo, we support the 1% pledge, on your website. And that's when they all drew the line and said, absolutely won't do that. And these are my friends. Absolutely won't do that, because then we're encouraging them. And I'm going, what's wrong with that? But hey, we're still making progress.
What attribute or action or activity do you really love to see in another investor? Not specifically something you think is most helpful or makes a good investor, but what thing when you see an investor doing just really warms your heart and makes you just really like them as a person?
In a situation, and these happen all the time, where the founder has an adversarial relationship with their investors, one investor will stand up and say, I'm going to defend the founder. The rest of you, my cronies, can go to hell. We're supporting this founder. That is very difficult, but it happens. And that's an investor that we like a lot. They have conviction around being advocates for founders. Being a founder is not easy. And so if somebody puts an unreasonable stumbling block in front of them, that is not fair. But there's lots of gang-ups where they're making it harder for the founder than it should be. And if there'll be a good investor who says, no, we're not doing that.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
It's a pleasure.